This is Babz Rawls-Ivy from New Haven, Connecticut, and you're listening to WNHHLP 103.5 FM, streaming live at newhavenindependent.org.
Woo, the wheels do indeed keep spinning. I'm doing something I haven't done in a long time. I'm having a guest in the 9 o'clock hour, and it's the fabulous Mercy Quaye from the Project. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning.
I love this haircut. That's very...
Oh, thank you. You know what? I actually have been waiting to get new headshots done because for the Arts and Ideas Festival, I had this like long flowy hair, and I was like, nobody gonna recognize me. So I need to get some new headshots done, but thank you.
As somebody who a couple of years ago was like had a serious wig game, I gotta tell you, every time I showed up somewhere, people didn't know where. I go to my church, Mercy, and people are like, "Hi, welcome." I'm like, "It's me." Every Sunday I'd have a different wig on, and they'd be like, "Welcome." I was like, "It's me."
They're like, "Do you have a church home?"
Welcome. It's so nice for you to join us. And I'm like, why are they talking to me like I'm some new member? This is my church.
Listen, Meg Thee Stallion said it best. Switch my wig, make him feel like he's cheating.
Yes. So how you doing? How's everything with the narrative? Listen, y'all are growing by leaps and bounds.
Yeah, it's crazy over here. It's great. It's wonderful. It's marvelous. It's to steal a word that someone else when I was talking to them said, it was like, it feels meteoric. And you know I love space, so that feels appropriate.
Yes, girl. We have that same in common vibe.
Right. So yeah, no, things are going great. We just celebrated on 10/10 on October 10th. The second anniversary of our launch event. We had our formal launch event in 10/10/19.
Really?
Yeah.
God, it flew. Holy cow.
You remember that, right?
Yes.
And so that was 2 years ago that we we had our launch event. We had been doing business for about 6 months as an agency before that, but that was our formal launch event. And so now we're like, just out of our terrible twos, hitting 3 soon.
trying to hire more people.
Right. So right now we've got a staff of 13.
Wow.
Staff of 13, office downtown New Haven, across the street from Barcelona.
Is that where y'all are? Because I didn't know where y'all were. I don't know why I was thinking you were somewhere at the Concorp site, but
So we do a lot of work over at Concorp, and so that makes sense. That relationship makes sense. And would love to have space down at Concorp if you're listening, E.
I know, right? Listen, that place is tricked out beautifully. I took a tour with Aya, and I was
Aya's great.
I was like, I need a sugar daddy to fund me some office space.
Listen, when you find one, send them my way too.
or angel benefactor, angel, sugar daddy. It doesn't matter. Right. I need somebody
something. Whatever you want to call yourself is fine, right?
Yes. that place is gorgeous. Like good parking too. So
good parking, neighborhood base. It feels good to be over there.
It does. Mm-hmm. So what are you up to? What brings you to my neighborhood today?
Yeah. So thank you for having me on. Wanted to definitely, right, as TMP is sort of growing and shifting and forming and really trying to cement this phrase that didn't exist in our industry before, and the industry being public relations, cement the definition of what anti-racist public relations is, right? For us, we've been defining it as, in order to understand this definition, you have to understand the industry accepted definition of public relations, right? And that industry accepted definition is the creation and maintenance of mutually beneficial relationships between an organization and its stakeholders. Cool, that's fine, right? And you can do that doing social media relations. You can do that in various ways. But the way that we define anti-racist public relations takes that and brings it to a different level. And so our definition is the creation and maintenance of mutually beneficial relationships between an organization and its diverse stakeholders to end and address the impact of racism. And so it really is about ending and addressing the impacts. We can't do one without the other. Oftentimes we're like, well, as long as everybody's not racist, we don't have to worry about anything else. And that's just not the case. And so we also know that in doing that, you need partners in order to propel that work forward. And so we're in the process right now, and actually in 5 days, we close applications. We are launching our inaugural advisory board. And this advisory board is basically one of the ways that we're envisioning working with community to hear from community how they want to be engaged with, and this is going to be an immense benefit to our partners. Anyone who has worked with the Narrative Project so far understands that we don't actually have that traditional client consultant relationship. We actually have done away with those words altogether. We have the organizations that we serve, we don't call them clients, we call them our mission partners. And we're their communications partners, right? We are both partnering to achieve this mission, this ultimate goal, right? And so it's going to be, this advisory board is going to be this immense value add and benefit to our partners, specifically because we get this ready access to a group of community members, to a group of experts in their field, regardless of what that field might be. It'll be based in one of our 12 key issue areas, which is everything from environmental justice to food justice to healthcare, immigration, police brutality, economic justice, right? And so we're bringing together individuals who have both lived and learned experiences. And by that, I mean, have you been in the thick of it, right? Are you someone who has faced food injustice or housing insecurity? And on the other side, are you someone who works on housing policy? Are you someone who works on food and environmental policy? We want to bring both of those people to the table so that when we are creating messages and campaigns for our partners, we can bring it back to this advisory board, right? Our narrative advisors to say, all right, are we in the right direction? If this was the thing, if you were the target audience for this, how would you receive this messaging? How would you receive this campaign? What should we be thinking about differently? Right. Okay. And so effectively it's this captive audience for ongoing focus groups to make sure we're pressure testing our work. Right. And it's really cool because, again, public relations agencies don't do work in this way. They don't tap into, no, not at all. Right. Like
I come from that's my back. I come from that.
You come from this
New
world,
York,
right?
And so no, they're not doing, no.
Exactly, right? And so when these campaigns are launched, right, you have situations where folks who are impacted by the issue weren't in the room making the final decisions on the campaigns. And then you get campaigns like Dove's Clean Skin campaign, right? or I talk about this all the time with my students at Southern. Pepsi's campaign with Kendall Jenner. It was like making this fantastic spectacle about protest, and at the end of it, she gives a Pepsi to a cop, and then everyone's cheering, and the protest is over. It was like, that's not what this is.
That's not how that works.
Right? Like, if only we knew Pepsi would end our suffering.
Martin Luther King would have been passing out Pepsis for days.
That's it, right? Exactly. And so we are just putting effectively our beliefs to the test and saying, well, if we're saying we're working with community, we actually have to bring people who are impacted by the issue and people who have studied the issue together in the same room to advise us on our work.
So how much time commitment would this advisory board have to be committed to?
And that's an important question, right? Because we also want it to be as equitable as possible. Oftentimes what you see is there are these situations where people want to pick people's brains, right? Like mine them for their resources and never actually compensate them. And it ends up being a great deal of time, but people never get any either recognition or credit or compensation. And so we wanted to be really mindful about the time commitment. And then also we wanted to make sure that we're compensating folks. And so on a monthly basis, we're treating these as focus groups. There's going to be one advisory board meeting on a monthly basis. And that meeting is going to be around 3 hours long to go through several campaigns from different partners of ours. And there may be some like pre-work or post-work, but very minimal. So ultimately, it would end up being about a 3.5 hour commitment to 4 hour commitment. I think what we put on the job description is like 3 to 5 hours a month. And right, we have a modest but meaningful compensation. We're going to offer an honorarium to our advisory board members, $100 a month for their participation. Really,
that's pretty nice.
It's decent, right? And we're looking for around 12 to 16 people to join this board and really advise and lead our work. And it's so important because this is an opportunity to see yourself reflected back into the work that organizations in New Haven or Connecticut writ large are doing for and in our communities, right? And so looking at our full list of partners, we work with organizations like CT Voices, right? We work with organizations like Planned Parenthood. And when it comes to the advisory board, we have this opportunity to kind of come back and say, all right, Planned Parenthood is about to launch this initiative, program, campaign, whatever it might be. Here are the things we want your feedback on. And you can see that work, that insight reflected back into the work. That's good.
So what do your partners feel? The people who pay you to do this work, how do they feel about this?
So, so far we've been hearing nothing but great news. They actually want us to get it off the ground sooner than what we're planning.
I would imagine this would be good because a lot of these organizations, white organizations, don't know how to talk to a particular communities. And so this might be good for, I think this would be good for them because this gives them an access that they don't have. No matter how much time they try to put in, they would never have this kind of access.
And it really also means that on an annual basis, because our advisory board members will rotate out on an annual basis, right? But for one solid year, you have like a captive audience to pressure test, right? Your campaigns. It means that like these are folks who are along the ride with you, who are investing into your work as we are investing into them. And they are saying, listen, through this work, we care about what you're saying to our communities. And this is how we want to be communicated with. Right. And I think that like, again, public relations or communications agencies don't do this kind of work. They'll put together campaigns that aren't informed by anything but the expertise
and get it wrong
in the room, and then get it completely wrong, and won't know that it's wrong until they went viral on Facebook, right? And so this is one of those opportunities for us to be able to pressure test before we launch and see if we're heading in the right direction. We've got a team of experts here, but that also for us. Right, we don't just want the expertise of comms folks, of folks who have been in public relations or journalism all their lives. We want the
regular people.
Regular
people, but
people who are either impacted by the issue, lived the issue, studied the issue, learned the issue, right? And that really ends up being a value add to the work down the line.
I like that. So would you do this for so you would gather people on a monthly basis, and you would run down the laundry list of the clients this month, and these are the campaigns they're thinking of running, or these are the things that they're trying to figure out how to get out to the larger public. And then your focus group would say, I can identify with that, or how about if you do this, how about you do that, or I don't know about that messaging, or can you break it down? Is that your thinking?
Yeah, exactly. It would end up being a focus group where, we might run messaging by them and say, all right, so look, the campaign is, we're going to call the campaign X, Y, and Z. And we'll ask the question, how does that resonate with you? And we'll get folks' organic feedback on that. That feels good to me. Actually, no, that sounds crazy because in my community, what that would mean is X, Y, and Z, right? And then some of it will be very guided conversation, and some of it will be organic conversation, so that we're collecting all of that, right? A lot of people don't know this, but like public relations at its core is a study, right? You are studying the ways to best communicate with individuals and then applying those lessons back into the work. And so my hope for TMP is sort of, we have these focus groups so that we're adding research into sort of the methodology for how we're serving our partners. And, these board meetings on a monthly basis, we have more than 20 partners that we're working with. In the new year, I'm sure we're going to exceed that. We'll be probably in the 30s or 40s. We're not going to be able to get to every single one on every single month and during every single month. But luckily, not every single organization is launching something new every month. Right. Not every organization is sort of, dropping a new initiative, a new program every single month. And so there's going to be a pretty organic rotation of what we're bringing to our advisory board members. And additionally, right, in the event, it's a slow, like, let's call it July, and the mission-driven organizations that we are working with are taking the summer off, right? They're on hiatus, and there's not a lot of flow of questions for our advisory board members. I like to respect people's time. And so in the event we're not working on something that needs community feedback during the summer, great. We will have you reappropriate your time for that advisory board meeting and still compensate you for the time that you would have been there, right? So really valuing people's participation. And then on the other side of that, TMP is an organization that cares about these issues as well. TMP is an organization that has its own programs and initiatives, right? And 12 key issue areas that we focus on. So when we're putting out content and information that we want feedback on, we may very well say, all right, so this is a campaign TMP is launching. What's your feedback for us on that? To make sure that we are getting it right for ourselves as well.
I like this idea because you know what it does? It marries public relations and marketing, or because there are firms out there that do just focused research kinds of things, right? Yeah. And I remember, when I was running nonprofits 1,000 years ago, you would hire a research group to bring your focus groups online to sort of do this very thing. But you're getting ahead of that. You're like, listen, we know what we want to do, and we're going to talk to the people that we think would be, it's not random, but random in the sense that you can't control who applies and whatever, but it's a deliberate ask, a deliberate reach out.
Absolutely. And that continuity of thought from the same cohort is also really interesting to me. Yeah. Right. And for one full year, who the experts are. And I'm calling folks experts if they are 23 and have been in the, criminal justice system since they were 15. I'm going to say you're an expert in the criminal justice system. Right. That's why I'm saying learned and lived experience. Right. And so it is important for us to have those experts in the room. And that, all right, in this cohort, we have experts in these categories, right? That allows us to tailor what our focus groups are about. And also it makes as well as anyone else, who's in the room to give you feedback matters as much as what they're giving you feedback on, right? Yes. It contextualizes that feedback, and it says, all right, well, Mercy, do you have a fair representation of the communities you're trying to serve here? And how are you making sure that, you're hitting diversity metrics? How are you making sure that you're having representation of skill set? How are you making sure you're having gender, sexuality, religious, I'll even industry diversity in the room to make sure that the information that we're giving back to ourselves and our partners are well-rounded.
This sounds more like equity and inclusion than the foolishness I'm hearing about equity and inclusion.
I mean, it's a big deal. I think that one of the pieces, so public relations gets such a bad rap, and you and I could talk about this forever. Public relations get such a bad rap because it's all like, well, my influencer really is into oranges right now. And it's like, no one one cares about your influencer. Right. And whenever we think of public relations practitioners, we think of publicists. We think of folks who like music industry and fashion industry. We think that's who we think of. We don't actually think a great deal about, the communications department down at United Way, or we don't think about how ACLU has a fantastic communications apparatus, and all of that is public relations, right? Yeah. For us at the Narrative Project, understanding this history of public relations, what we try to educate our partners on is that even though we hear that word and we're like, oh, well, we don't need PR. We always say public relations. We don't say PR, because we say you can take that public and think of it as a placeholder. Who is your public? Is it community relations? Is it educator relations? Is it student relations, right? Like, is it legislator relations? You take that public out, that's a placeholder. Take it out, put something in that means more to your work, right? Mm-hmm. Are you, and just because I said Planned Parenthood, are you looking at legislators? Are you looking at teens? Are you looking at folks who are interested in starting families, who are looking to terminate pregnancies, right? You can actually put any of those identities and put that into that placeholder where public is. And now the work is about how do you engage that specific stakeholder group, right? And that's where this research comes in, because we don't profess to know all the various ways people want to be engaged with. So we're going to go to you and ask.
See, I think this is so groundbreaking, because I think for so long, I'm always suspect when people's like, oh, I don't need public relations. It's like, yeah, you do. You do. You're liable to put a message out there that you will regret. Or if you put a message out there based on what you talked about in your own boardroom, and that's your own universe, and you don't have a clue about what's outside your doors, then you're going to be in trouble, and you're going to have an image problem, and you're going to have a message problem. Yep. And, and that's very real. So I'm glad you're doing this work, because I could tick off the top of my head, and I'm not going to do it, but I could tick off the top of my head how many organizations I know could benefit right this moment. Right.
And it's because, we sometimes in the nonprofit world think about, well, that's what we have our board of directors for. They're supposed to help us pressure test. But then you think about the way that the board of directors came to be and how it was comprised. And it's usually by recommendation, a friend of a friend, or by recruitment. And the folks you organically recruit are colleagues in your industry, folks who look like you, make as much money as you. And then what ends up happening is you have these really homogenous boards of directors.
Yeah.
Right. And that's in any direction. That's if you are a community organization working with the Latinx community, then your board of directors should reflect that community. But how are you tapping into communities that don't look like you? The organizations who need it the most are these organizations who serve Black and Brown communities, but at the leadership are predominantly white led, whether that is at the C-suite executive level or in the boardroom. And so what this also offers for, that range of organizations is, listen, how do we create messages that will resonate with anyone who you might be interested in reaching, right? We want campaigns and messages and programs and initiatives that are most impactful, because if you're only talking to the choir, if you're only preaching to the choir, how much work can we actually get done, right? Policy doesn't change because you're preaching to the choir. Policy changes because you have your captive audience that are your folks who are bought in, and you've kept them bought in because you continue to engage, but then you're also doing a lot of work to bring people along with you. And that's what this work is about. How can you do that? How can you both engage your primary stakeholder groups and then find out find out who those people are that might be on the fence on your issue, but can create messages that might bring them along too.
So Mercy, where do you see TNP going? What is like, because I know from when you dreamed this up and from where you are, I'm sure that it has changed a little bit, maybe it's on the trajectory to do exactly what you wanted to do.
TNP is exactly on the trajectory that I mean, we always have to be adaptive to change is what I'll say. And I'm really excited because I have a fantastic team, and, inside our team, we say this all the time, like adopt a culture of continuous improvement, being able to identify our holes and figure out what the next places are for consistent growth. Going into year 3, I don't know if I would have imagined having a staff of 13, right? That feels like, again, meteoric growth. But I do know that we're on trajectory to be where I want to be, which is I want to be I want to continue being the leader in anti-racist public relations in the state. But I don't actually think that the work that we're doing here meets our ultimate mission, which again is creating and maintaining those mutually beneficial relations with diverse stakeholders in their organization to end and address the impact of racism. We don't do that if we're only in Connecticut, right? And so as much as you want to end and address the impacts of racism in Connecticut, that's only one state. And then even if we're in every state, that's only one country, right? And so I think that the trajectory of work like this is that if you are truly trying to achieve that mission, you have to have a global perspective of what it takes to achieve that mission. And right, so if anyone follows us on Twitter, they know that our handle on Twitter is TMPCT, and that is with intention. Because in the same way that we are here saying, look, the best way you can communicate with communities is to go to be embedded in that community, hire locally, right? Hire people who have lived or learned experience or are from that geography, right? Mm-hmm. Be embedded locally, and then also go to that community and say, how do you want to be interacted with? That's 2 important pieces. So if that's the case, as an organization, TMP can't take on new organizations who are from LA and say that we're doing this authentically. Actually, what will end up happening is that, maybe this is a 10-year plan, Babz, I don't know, but what will end up happening is you might see a TMP LA where the same model goes there. We set up an advisory board, we hire locally, we invest in folks who have both lived and learned experience, ensure that the diversity is rooted on both of those levels, both in our narrative advisors and on our staff, right? And from that, we can make decisions about our communications support for our partners from that local perspective, right? And a lot of this comes from the journalism world, right? Having spent time in journalism, you and I might be both biased in this, but New Haven Independent is doing a fantastic job and has always been doing sort of a leader here in New Haven, because the folks who work at the New Haven Independent are vested in this city and embedded in this city.
And it starts at the leadership. Like Paul is the leader, right? I mean,
exactly.
He would frown and cry about that part, but he's the leader, and he's local, and he sets the tone for the commitment to New Haven and Hamden now too, but to New Haven foremost. And I think that's very valuable that you say that, because I think that's important.
Yeah. And this is one of those things that that model of like local, on the ground journalism that we have seen work for the Independent, for some reason, when we translate that over to public relations, we're like, it doesn't matter. You can do the same. Communications is communications wherever you are. And it's like, yeah, but the people aren't the same people wherever you are. Right, so what are you communicating?
And it rings hollow, right? Like it doesn't ring authentic.
WNHHLP 103.5 FM, streaming live at newhavenindependent.org.
The conversation was getting so good, I forgot the FCC rules. I was like, oh yeah, I gotta do that. So anyway, but yeah, so when you do that kind of thing, it doesn't seem authentic.
Right, exactly. Ooh, and that's a word. That is a word, because we also talk about that a great deal here. Any public relations campaign, program, initiative, apparatus, whatever it is, right, that is going to be successful has to do 2 things. It has to be authentic, which means who are your, who is in your active audience? Who's your captive audience? Who are the folks that are already in your camp, right? Who is your choir? Who are your parishioners? Who's in your church? Right? And then it has to be a different A word, which is approachable. Right? And we talked about that a little bit a moment ago. You have to be getting the folks who are in your camp and attracting folks who aren't in your camp yet. Right? So authentic. You can't do the thing that says, no, we are like Nike, when they are doing any marketing campaign, they're not like, okay, well, we want to be Gucci, so now we're going to do X, Y. No, it's like, we're Nike. We're always going to be Nike.
We're all going to say, just do it.
We're always
Like,
going
that's
to say,
always
just
going to
do
be a
it.
part of our story.
Exactly. And through being authentic in that way, you develop community around your brand. You develop brand loyalists. You develop folks who are like, no, I only wear Nikes. I don't wear anything else. I only wear Nikes. And that's because they remain authentic. But then you can't sometimes, right, and continue to grow and impact and spread whatever your message is. Nike now, when I talk about approachability, would be remiss if they didn't continue to find those opportunities to penetrate demographics, to penetrate communities that they're not already in. That's why you have to remain approachable, right? And that translates across the board, whether that is apparel. Now, we don't do apparel, but that's a great example because everyone knows Nike. But like thinking about politics, you have people who are in your camp, and then you have people who are on the fence. If Democrats start saying things that aren't authentic to the Democratic brand, right? It was like, well, every gun for every household. That's not authentic, right? That's just not authentic to what Democrats believe. Yes. But how do you create messages outside of that might be approachable to folks who are on the fence, right? Mm-hmm. So it may very well be staying authentic to your liberal values, right? Everyone should have universal healthcare and universal pre-K, right? Or childcare. But then the approachable piece might be something along the lines of, and I don't agree with this, but the approachable piece is something along lines that we're seeing now, which is like a slow incremental increase to minimum wage, so that folks can get on board with increasing that minimum wage in the first place, right? And so there is that balance that you have to strike to keep your community, but grow it as well.
I enjoyed this conversation this morning. I love when you come on. I just love talking to you. So before I let you go, because I know you got like a gazillion things to be and do, tell people how to find your application for the advisory.
Absolutely. You can go to narrative-project.com, and on the About page, you'll see that application. You can also go to any of our social media channels, and we are posting and promoting information about it all the live long day. And so please be sure to visit us at TMPCT on Twitter and at the Narrative Project on Facebook and Instagram.
Well, I want you to come back once you finalize your advisory committee, your group, and talk about what that process looked like and who's on it.
Absolutely. And I'm really, we've got some heavy hitter applicants already. I'm really excited about
it. Yay, I'm glad. You know what? That's good to know.
Yeah, I'm really excited. The application deadline is November 1st. So that is this upcoming Monday. So folks gotta get them applications in. And here's the thing, right? Doing this work authentically and equitably also means if you miss the deadline, if you miss the deadline, but you are investing in this work and you're interested and you have a background that says to me that you have lived and learned experience, apply anyway. And we'll find out if we can make room for you on the board.
Because I would imagine you will keep building an advisory board so that you can rotate and do all the things. So Mercy Quaye, I adore you. Thank you very much for coming on this morning.
Thank you so much for having me.
I so appreciate you, girl. Keep up the good work.
I appreciate you. All right, girl. I love the hair.
All right. Have a good one, my dear.
Bye.
Thank you. Okay, Harry. Woo! I just adore that Mercy Quaye. It was a good conversation, and I'm very interested in what she does with this. I come from a PR background, and she's talking about some new thing, and I certainly don't come from that. We certainly didn't think about things that way, and but I love it. I love it. So, Harry, I think you know what, we need to send Mercy Quaye to DC, and we need to send her to China, Russia, Australia, who else is making coal?
Yeah.
Harry, I you know what? I didn't mean to cut you off about that whole conversation, but I'm just so tired of these so-called countries that want to be, world dominating, but can't be good stewards of the earth. Like I don't understand how that works, but I'm just exhausted by it because there's no new Earth. We don't, unless Elon Musk, Gates, Bezos, they know something we don't know. So, and that could be real. So anyway, so we got a new conversation coming up at the 10 o'clock hour. I kind of like having dual guests, like guests. I don't know if I could do this every day like this. But I kind of dig it a little bit, Harry. You know.
Or like the thing is about like Mercy. It's hard to have her in like a 40-minute slot. A 45 minute
she
slot.
really needs an hour and a half.
Yeah.
I really need her on for an hour and a half because she really is. She has a good grasp of all of this, and she presents it in a way that you can follow along. Do you know what I mean? Like I like that.
Yep.
I like that.
All right. So once again, we're gonna cut out for music.
But we'll be back.
We'll be back with another stream with new guests. So we'll be right back. You're listening to LoveBabz, LoveBabz, Love Talk on WNHH LP 103.5 FM, your home for community radio.